interferer is not unlike uh, being able to overcome many interferers who are therefore sharing the bandwidth with you. If you doubt that that's information theory, let me just direct you to an interview that Bob Price had with Claude Shannon on the subject sometime in the early 80s. I've forgotten exactly where it was published, but I think it was probably in a newsletter, a news.
Communications magazine.
Oh, thank you. Uh, our historian. Finally, I can comment that all of this technology has led to being applied in several billion cell phones. Starting with GSM, which was using a very weak code. It only, as I recall, it was constraint length 5, 16 states. And of course, at Qualcomm, we did far better. And, and also applied CDMA. CDMA is not the end all, but it played its role, and now there's 4G, and there will be 5G, because every decade has to have a new generation, if nothing else for commercial reasons. So what is the future? I have no idea, but network information theory is certainly an elegant field. Whether it really blossoms into applications, I don't know. More likely security. Information theory certainly plays a role there. Whether it'll be commercial or not, that's less important than it'll be useful. Medicine, life sciences, who knows? I want to make a final comment about memory, about history. History, as has often been said, is really a pack of lies, and it's not necessarily lies because people are mendacious, which some are, but because your memory is really not about the real event. It's about your recollection of that event. So it's more like meta-memory. You remember what you previously had thought about it, and obviously with time it always gets better. Thank you.
Well, being the last one, I'll try to make it short. Coming back to Shannon, I decided to go to MIT because I was enchanted by a lousy book on information theory, which you probably don't know. Sergio might. A book by Goldman.
Yes.
A terrible book, but the topic was fascinating. And I thought that I'll have a chance to get something out of Shannon. But when I came to MIT, he wasn't really, he was there, but we couldn't see much of him. And my advisor was Jack Rosencraft, and actually Fano as well. And I've heard that in Shannon's lectures, which he gave from time to time, he made a set of notes which had to do with the Chernoff bound for large deviation, which was exactly what I needed, because at that time I was, like many other, was very interested in error exponent. What else? And this was a real treasure for me. And just after that, I started to write down my thesis. And but I haven't seen him there. My first face-to-face meeting with Shannon was when he was awarded the first Harvey Prize by the Technion. He and Dr. Kolf. Dr. Kolf was the inventor of the artificial kidney. And the prize was given by was given at the residence of the President of Israel, and I had the honor to walk Shannon all the way to the podium. And when we got there, he was at his best then. And when he got to the podium, he introduced himself, saying, "I'm Claude Shannon, and I'm working at the Technion of the USA. So, but he was really at his best, in very good mood. And this gave both me and Aaron, when we started Aaron Weiner, later Aaron Weiner, when we thought of, when we started to work on the Ashkelon symposium, to perhaps inviting him. We didn't know whether he'll come or not. And as a temptation, we came up with the idea of establishing the Shannon lecture. We didn't know that it's going to be the first one, but nevertheless, he came. And what happened there, I mean, you got I mean, Dave told you exactly what it was a bit unpleasant and unclear to us what's going on then. But the lecture was okay as far as I recall. Another interesting connection, which Bob might not remember, when I was still a student at MIT, I got a part-time job in a company named Melpar, which I don't know how I got there, either through you or through Tom Kailat. But anyway, my first job ever there was to try and make sense out of Bob's LDPC. Now, I don't know what happened because I left right after that. And the Steve Sussman was there, remember him? And then I went back home. And I remember that, well, I had a 2 years leave from the, I was then at the research department of the Ministry of Defense here. And the, one of the professors at MIT was Bob, was Bill Siebert. And he gave me a term paper to work on. And I got very friendly with him. And he said, well, Jacob, do you really think that information theory is going to keep Arabs out of Israel? I said, no, I definitely don't know anything about that. But one thing I'm very pretty sure of, and that is that we will keep the Jews in. So, so then, being more serious, the approach, I mean, Bob pointed out to the real essence of information theory, which is perhaps the tradition we inherited from Shannon, to look for simple problems, and then if you solve that, a simple model, you can then, if needed, try and extend it further, rather than to take a global approach and working all your way downward, you know. And there was always, and this proved itself many times, coming back to some of my contributions. The Lempel Ziv started by, I mean, understanding very well the potential in ergodic theory. And only later came the idea of replacing the ergodic theory by the individual sequence approach, which is just an easy way out, but you pay a lot because this gives you only asymptotic results, and you cannot say anything about the rate of approach because you don't have a model. But anyhow, so this is one example. It definitely resulted from this, the theoretical approach that we all dealt with. And so forth, the other thing like the Weiner-Ziv results and so forth. Another example, Andy mentioned the G3, the G4. The G4, the 4G, yeah, sorry. The 4G resulted from a company by the name of Flarion, which was established by guys from Bell Labs, and and Rajib Laroya, the guy. And Rajib started the whole thing by simply being enchanted by a very theoretical paper by Aaron Weiner, which was called Shannon Theory, Shannon Approach to da da da. I don't remember the rest of it, yes. And the idea was there. So this gave him the idea to start to work in this direction as a replacement for the CDMA approach.
Rajib was a University of Maryland graduate, by the way.
Oh, really? He's a wonderful guy.
Distinguished graduate.
He's even. And so this is another example of very clear connection between a pure theoretical approach to a real application, which has a huge impact. And I understand from Andy that actually Flarion saved Qualcomm in a way. But okay.
I wasn't Flarion.
Okay, yes. By the way, and another episode, I mean, Rajib approached me. We knew each other at Bell Labs. We were the same group, headed by Aaron, which was not there by at that time already. But he invited me to join the advisory board, which I did, and together with then Shlomo and others. And but he then wanted to get Andy into the action, but he was too shy to approach him. So he wanted me to introduce him to Andy. So that's my contribution to 4G. So this is another application of connectivity, not. So what else? I mean, when it comes to future development, I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to predict the future, as you know. But I really feel that we can say, using information theoretic tools, there's a lot to be done in not just classical prediction and estimation, but in particular when it comes to bioinformation, biogenetic information, and so forth. Because that area is full with algorithms, which works, but I don't know. Well, Andrew described the picture for you. The algorithm works, that's what they say, but they don't really know why, and how can you believe that they work? There's no theory behind it. And I know I wrote a small note and sent it to one of the journals, but it wasn't an algorithm. It was just a theoretical proof trying to explain why some of the better algorithms for classification worked, and it was rejected because there was no real new algorithm there. And I said, this is not what I want to do. I just wanted to prove that a well-known algorithm which you use is reliable and makes sense. So, but really, my feeling is that there's a lot to be done there, a real need, and a real market too. So that's another area, and neural net, of course, and so forth, that application might find their place. Information theoretic application might find their place there, but who knows? And the coming back to the old days, that they were all simpler and nicer and beautiful, as Bob said. Well, we were younger, that's all. That's the only reason. Thank you.
I'd just like to add something to what Jacob said about Goldman's book. It was indeed terrible. I had a worse experience. I actually had a course out of it at a university that didn't know anything about information theory and is now one of the world's centers on information theory. I won't tell you where it is, but it's in Southern California. But it inspired me to go read Fano's monograph, which was the only book, the first book actually, written on information theory, and where I learned all about error bounds and exponents. And then of course I got a hold of Bob's paper, a preprint of the paper, and that's all I did for the next decade or so. And the algorithm came out of trying to prove an exponent, which was a lot of fun.
So let me just mention that we have permission from the organizers to perhaps extend the time of the panel a little longer. We'll just shift everything so there's no parallel session going on. Before I ask for questions from the audience or additional comments by the panelists, I'd just like to mention one thing, since Jacob mentioned about the future. In the year 2000 at the ISIT, many of you may recall, we had a panel for the next 50 years of information theory. We had just celebrated in '98 the first 50 years, and actually Bob Gallagher and Jacob Zib were there, along with Jim Massey and Tom Cover on that panel. And yes, and you were there. And
we came up with the same predictions.
well, yeah, I want to say the wisdom of Jacobs was this. He said, okay, the question was, what do you see happening in the next 50 years? And he said, one thing is sure, we won't be here to discuss it. So before the panelists make additional comments, would there be anybody from the audience who wants to ask a question or make a comment? Yes.
I just wanted to, we know Shannon was at Ashkelon, and we know he was at Brighton, and he was at Michigan, in terms of ISITs. I don't think he was at any ISITs between Ashkelon and Brighton.
Yeah, this is correct.
What about before Ashkelon? There were maybe, what, 6 or 8 or 10 ISITs prior to Ashkelon. Do we know if Shannon was at any of those? Did he submit papers? Did he get paper rejected like Jacob did? Do we know any of? Did he interact with ISITs at all? Do you guys remember?
I don't think so.
No.
My memory starts from '67, and he didn't.
In fact, it's interesting because the only paper that he published in the information theory transactions, other than the famous editorial on the bandwagon, was the Elias Feinstein-Shannon paper on mean cut max flow, which is of course better known as Ford Fulkerson. But
Wasn't his paper with Bob in the IT transactions?
no, Shannon, Gallagher, and Berlacamp was in information and control. Yeah.
Yes.
I think Bob Gallagher mentioned the connection to music. I mean, the beauty of music and the beauty of information theory. So what always astonished me is that when you sometimes they ask somebody that wrote a hit if he knew in advance that it would be such a big hit in music, then he said, no, I didn't have an idea that this would be the one. And also I noticed, I think it seems that the discoveries like Lempel-Ziv or Viterbi or LDPC, for example, it seems that it took some time until somebody else rediscovered it, and only then it became famous. So did you know when you made these things that this would be the great achievement?
I think most people who have great achievements, I think they know it. I think they know it's beautiful. They don't know how well it will be accepted by other people. And many famous musicians have been rejected by other people until they become famous. And of course, once they're famous, everything they do is thought to be wonderful by everyone else. And it's the same, I think it's the same in the painting field and other fields. I mean, what is beautiful is in the mind of the beholder. and you know when you do something if it's beautiful because you see this beautiful symmetry. You're turned on by it. You think it's wonderful, but not necessarily does anyone else appreciate it for a long time.
Yeah, I want to make a comment about recollections of Shannon. It was pointed out there may have been decline in his thinking already in 1973. I came to Brighton in 83, and I had lunch with him.
85.
No, 85 was the
85.
Yeah.
Right, okay, 85. Thank you for the clarification. And he didn't recall much about entropy. But you know it has a very parallel, mathematically very similar, in fact more general form, in growth rate optimal portfolios, something Tom Cover contributed to a lot. In fact, Tom would say that he developed his ideas first by thinking about money, and then he could translate it to an information theory. Tom was giving a lecture in a session, and Claude came. And Tom was choosing to restrict his portfolios to the weights being in the positive orthant, right? But you can allow borrowing, you can allow weights to go negative as long as the result is still positive, and it can produce potentially higher growth rates. Claude asked the question showing that he realized that Tom was missing that opportunity of higher growth rate, and it showed to me that he was still very alert about matters that were of equivalent mathematical challenge to what he knew in information theory.
If I might add something about Shannon, in